Okay, so this is a presentation about the vine tree. Now, vine is the first tree of the third quarter of the year. So each quarter is known in Gaelic as an Aicme. So we're now into the Aicme Muin, which is the beginning of the third quarter. Now, if you look back on the YouTube channel, I recently did a kind of overview of the 4 Aicme. So there was a rough guide to the first Aicme, the second Aicme, because we've done those since January. Now we're halfway through the year and we're about to start the third Aicme. Before I go into that, there's definitely a pattern with each of the quarters of the year, and I'll come to that shortly. Vine, though, and I don't know which authors say it. I'm not well read on all of the Ogham authors, modern day authors, but it has been put out there that the Celts of Ireland didn't have vine. And so it's contentious with some people that study the Ogham, but they did, you know, and there were even Celtic gods of the vine. Now, I don't want to waste time going into all that, but tomorrow on the Facebook group, I'll put a post up that gives all the historical evidence for the Celts of Ireland having vine, definitely in the Iron Age and possibly even in the Bronze Age, you know, and even if it didn't grow so far north, they certainly traded for it. And there's plenty of archaeological evidence for that. But vine is difficult to get hold of if you're collecting twigs for your own Ogham. So a lot of people do substitute it with blackberry, which is perfectly fine. But the idea that the Celts didn't have vine is not true. So we need to nip that in the bud. So before I go into vine itself, the third Aicme tells a story that is all about the sacred marriage of the Lord and Lady, God and Goddess, which has many different layers of meaning, but it's also about getting ready to enter the ancient mystery traditions. And that's a very vague statement. And as the next 3 months pass by, it will make more sense. Now, with the Ogham, you can approach it from, you know, some people try and approach it from an Iron Age Druidic Celtic perspective, and that's doable, but most of the written evidence, you're talking 13th century, 14th century, and things have moved on by over 1,000 years from the Druids. And so when you're into that medieval time, really you're talking about Irish and Welsh bardic tradition. So you must kind of clarify 2 things in your brain then. Is it Iron Age Druidic law? You know, we could call it original Celtic law, or is it medieval bardic tradition? Now, by default, most of the written evidence comes through the medieval bardic tradition, whether it's Irish or Welsh. And there's plenty of evidence in the Ogham and the stories, Celtic mythology, that there is mystery tradition things going on. For instance, this famous story of Ceridwen and Taliesin, Star Law mystery tradition. Now, on the Facebook group, the Ogham Grove, there is a files section. You can go on the group, click on files, and there's a PDF file, and it's free. You can free to download, and it's called Star Law Basics and the Rites of Ceridwen. And that's all about the Welsh bardic mystery school tradition, if you like, but it points at the older mystery traditions, which were across Mediterranean Europe, Greek and Roman and Egyptian, Greco-Egyptian mystery rites, Eleusinian mysteries and mysteries of Dionysus and Bacchus and Mithras and so on. And all of those many different mystery cults, even Isis and Osiris was a mystery cult. They all find their way into the Roman Empire, and therefore the Romano-Celts of Gaul and Britain for 400 years. For 400 years, those influences were there. And for instance, in Somerset, the West Country of Britain, most of the mosaics in the Roman villas that they've excavated have mosaics of Bacchus, the wine god, but Bacchus is only the Roman name for Dionysus, and Dionysus and Bacchus are figureheads of mystery traditions, and so these find their way, certainly after Rome leaves, into, I don't know what you would call it, post-Roman paganism or whatever. But again, that's all there before the bardic mystery tradition. The bardic mystery tradition is born from the reclamation yard of the Roman Empire, all those icons were there. Anyway, so here's how the Aicme Muin pans out. You've got 5 trees. You've got vine, ivy, broom, blackthorn, and elder. And here's how they correspond with mystery tradition lore. Now, vine is very important. It's the wine, and the following tree after it is ivy. Now, vine and ivy combined are 2 things. First of all, vine and ivy are the headdress, the foliage around the head of Bacchus and Dionysus. Okay, so it's Romano and Greek mystery gods, if you like. But during their mystery rites, they would make intoxicating wine drink with all sorts of magical ingredients thrown in to maybe encourage visions and altered states of minds and stuff. And the main leaves were combined in the Bacchanalian rites were vine and ivy, and vine and ivy are side by side in the Aicme Muin. Begins with vine, it's the fruiting quarter of the year, and there it is, and the very next tree is the ivy. Now, in traditional ancient mystery traditions, the ivy is the calling card of Dionysus, if you like. It's the main symbol for Dionysus, even though he and Bacchus are the grapevine. Ivy is really important, and you're not meant to eat ivy, but you can. Doesn't taste very nice. I've tried it. You can chew it like chewing tobacco, and you don't swallow it because it will burn the inside of your throat. So you just chew it and spit it out. And what it does is the gums absorb whatever chemical is in it and takes it up into your brain. And it's slightly mind altering. In my experience, it liberated a lot of tension in my spine, and it made colors very vivid. Now, I'm not a drug taker. I've never done any hard drugs or anything, and I don't drink really. I can get drunk on 1.5 pints of beer. So I'm quite sensitive, I guess, so chewing ivy, not a nice taste. It was an interesting experience. But wine, of course, is alcoholic. It loosens inhibitions, relaxes repression. So combined, the wine, the vine and the ivy combined, plus other secret ingredients that each mystery cult would specialize in, are going to give altered perceptions of reality to the people getting involved. Now, ivy takes you into Lunacy. It's the first herald of Lunacy. You know, it's a festival named after Lu, the beautiful young god, you know, and here he is kind of walking under the trees of Bacchus and Dionysus. So I just call him the Lord, but it's Lu, it's Lugus, and the other tree of Lunacy is the goddess. It's Broom. Now, throughout the Mabinogion, many different Celtic goddesses are, in the description of their beauty, their hair is always as yellow as the broom or as golden as the broom. You know, that somehow this blonde, golden, broom-haired ideal is there in the Welsh stories. But the star law of Broom, very, very important. And I'll come back to it in a second because I just forgot the star law of ivy. So the star law of vine is all Cancer the crab, and it's the only sign governed by the moon. So it's interesting that vine is Muin, and it relates to the moon sign, you know, it's just a coincidence, I'm sure. But ivy crosses the cusp between Cancer the crab and Leo the lion. So ivy is moon and sun. Now that's really important with the iconography of the planetary chakras, you know, like with Mithras on Hadrian's wall. So you often get the Lord of Heaven, Lord of the Stars, depicted like this. He's kind of staring at you, and above his head is Cancer the crab and Leo the lion, and the Lord of the Heavens is right in the cusp. Two important things about then, it's to do with the mind being lunar and solar, and only ivy can do that. Now, on Hadrian's wall, it's the Persian god Mithras depicted with the crab and the lion. And in Vézelay in France, which was a basilica built on a hilltop that had a grapevine all over it and a temple dedicated to Bacchus, you know, this is Vézelay. And then the Christians put the basilica on it, and they depict Jesus at the great entrance with the zodiac around him, and Cancer the crab and Leo the lion are there just like Mithras on Hadrian's wall. So it's a way of representing the Lord of the starry heavens, but between the moon and the sun. Now here's a gender balancing thing. That moment in time, and this Christian basilica at Vézelay on top of the Bacchus temple is a cult center for Mary Magdalene. Okay, the French mysteries. And Mary Magdalene's feast day is the 22nd of July. And the 22nd of July is the cusp between the crab and the lion. You know, so Mithras is depicted with the crab and the lion, Jesus, crab and lion, and Mary Magdalene's feast day, crab and lion. There's this balance between the sun and the moon, you know. But back to the Aicme Muin. So ivy takes us to Lunacy. It seems to play the role of Lu as a divine king, if you like. I just say Lord. So I kind of think like Midsummer Night's Dream, like Oberon and Titania. So I'm kind of seeing ivy as an Oberon, Lu type Lord figure, you know. Anyway, so Broom, then the third tree in the Aicme Muin, she's some very important things, apart from being a blonde, yellow-haired beauty. She's the cusp of Leo the Lion and Virgo. And that Leo-Virgo cusp is the entrance moment into the mystery rites. Again, to confirm that, look at that PDF file in the files section called Star Lord Basics and the Rites of Ceridwen. Again and again, this cusp between Leo and Virgo comes up as the moment of mystery rites beginning. That's the entrance into the mysteries. So Broom holds that. She's standing there at the doorway into the mysteries, this Lunacy bride, Golden Queen, the Summer Queen. She's also the most important constellation for the mystery rites. Now, each of the 12 signs has other constellations that I call secondary constellations that belong to their part of the sky. So the secondary constellation of Leo the Lion, and remember in anatomy, Leo governs the heart, governs the middle cauldron. And in that part of the sky, there's this constellation called, now think about this, Crater, the wine mixing cup. Now, it's the prototype of the Holy Grail and all of that stuff, you know, to do with the wine of the Christian mass and things, but it's also Ceridwen's cauldron. It's the cauldron of Annuin, directly opposite Willow with the Pisces thing and everything, and the alder tree, which we kind of touched on previous videos. But go back then to this Aicme. First of all, it begins with the vine, the wine. And then it's the ivy, and you mix the vine and ivy together to make the intoxicating drink. And then Broom is the constellation of Crater, the wine mixing cup. Now, all three are obviously connected in that mystery school way, you know. Now, the fourth tree is the Blackthorn, and Blackthorn is Virgo herself. Now, she's really a triple goddess because she's governed by Mercury, which is three-faced. So Broom, the golden-haired beauty, is the maiden aspect, and Grail maiden because she's holding Crater, the wine mixing cup. And then Blackthorn is the mother herself, or the great queen herself. She's Virgo, which was, to the ancient mystery traditions, Demeter, Ceres, and in the Welsh bardic tradition, Ceridwen. You know, it's the same lady. The Haynes Taliesin about Ceridwen has her gathering all manner of herbs to put into her cauldron, you know, just like putting interesting ingredients into the wine mixing bowl for the initiates to drink, and so on. Now, here's a thing then. So Lunacy between Ivy and Broom is a marriage, and a child conceived at Lunacy is going to be born at Beltane. So Lunacy is this mating moment of the divine. It's the moment of alchemical marriage between the Lord and Lady, however you want to kind of get your head around that, you know. And you get to Imbolc, and it's in the belly, you know, and at Beltane born, you know, there's birth at Beltane. Now, in the story of Ceridwen, after chasing, doing the animal shapeshifting chase through the stars, the various constellations of the shapeshifting, she finally eats Gwion back. He's a little grain of wheat, and she consumes him. And it says quite clearly that he was inside her for 9 months and born at Beltane, you know. So there you go. It's this Lunacy sexuality, conceiving, and then 9 months later born. Or you could say that the mystery rites begin at this Leo-Virgo cusp. And then at the end of it, the initiated individual is going to be radiant brow, enlightened at Beltane. That's the Welsh bardic story that the Haynes Taliesin is pointing at. And finally, then, the last tree of the Aicme Muin is the elder tree. And that takes you from the cusp of Virgo into Libra. And that's the scales of justice. And it's also, in Celtic mythology, like you would refer to her as the washer at the ford or sort of thing. She cuts away all that is old and is no longer serving you. It's often quite difficult, but there's no rebirth without death, you know, and elder is the one with the sword that's going to cut you down as you descend into the mysteries, and you're going to be confronted with Libra and the weighing of the heart ceremony and all of that kind of stuff. So that's this whole Aicme, if you like, the wine, the vine, the ivy mixed with the vine, broom with the wine mixing cup constellation, and then the goddess of the mysteries herself, Demeter Ceres, in Welsh tradition, Ceridwen, and then concluding with elder to strip away all that you have been if you're pursuing initiation and wanting to become an initiate. You know, you can't have rebirth without death, you know. But having said all of that, that's just the pattern of this Aicme. It doesn't mean you have to go into a mystery school initiatory rite or anything. You can just observe it unfold as a seasonal star law. But if you had bardic or druidic mystery school ideas, this would be the time of year to put things into action. You know, this would be the time of year to begin an initiatory rite that concludes at Beltane. That would be working with this kind of thing, whether you do it with a group of people or just with your own meditations, you know, that is just putting those thoughts out there. That's the star law of this time of year for the next 3 months. Right. Before I talk about the Celtic gods of the vine, I will look at the Irish Ogham, and this is a real difficult one. I haven't got a clue about any of this, and I'll explain it as I go along. So this is the traditional meaning of Muin as given by the Book of Ballymo, Scholars Primer in 1390 AD, the Ogham or word kennings. And I think vine is probably the most complicated cryptic one in the whole lot. So first of all, the meaning of the word Muin, no one really knows. There's 3 favorite possibilities, and you have to work with all 3 or pick which one that makes sense to you. Okay, so the 3 possible meanings of Muin are neck, trick, as in doing a trick or tricking somebody, and then finally love. Well, 3 very different things: neck, trick, and love. You know, I would swing with love because of the idea of the alchemical marriage at Lunacer, you know. But are there cryptic meanings to neck and trick? I don't know. So that's the possible meanings of the word. Now here's the 3 word kennings, and they're cryptic too. I'm not any good at cryptic crossword puzzles. So the first one is strongest in exertion. Strongest in exertion. I don't know, is that neck and shoulders, like carrying a yoke or something? I've no idea. I'm just guessing. The second one is proverb of slaughter. proverb of slaughter? I've no idea. Does that relate to trick? I've no idea. And the third one is just as cryptic. Path, as in walkway or you know, passage. Path of voice. Again, that could relate to neck, maybe. Path of voice, the vocal cords or something. No idea how to work with any of that at all. So the final thing is the scholar's primer, and it's the scholar's primer that says it's vine, and its explanation isn't much. It just says highest of beauty is Muin, because it grows aloft, is a vine tree. So that's from 1390 AD. So from the 14th century onwards, you can say that Muin is the vine tree because of that statement. But the previous word kennings, I've no idea at all. So star law wise, then quickly, the vine is 9 degrees Cancer to 27 degrees Cancer. So it's the only tree in the Ogham Grove that is completely Cancer the crab. Simplistically, it's the only tree governed by the moon. And it's called Muin. It's just an interesting thing. So the previous tree, Apple took us from Gemini to Cancer. It took us from Mercury to the moon, and it's a rising energy. So that up until Apple, all of the energy has been rising up the spinal cord to the pineal gland, and then that radiant brow moment is the summer solstice, after which there's 3 days standstill and then a sinking down of energy again. So Apple holds that transition, that moment, but it also holds that Gemini mercurial, quick thinking, ducking and diving, busy Mercury energy. And then it takes you into the moon. Now, we talked about how the 2 parts of the brain are the moon and the sun. The moon side of the brain, the moonlight is reflected sunlight. So the sun is direct knowing. It doesn't have to think, it just knows. It's just shining, just knowing. But the moon is the reflective mind. It's the contemplating mind, the musing, the pondering, weighing things up, daydreaming is that. So you've had the rising of energy, you've had the fast mercurial stuff, and then there's a 3-day standstill and the beginning of the exhale, and that energy for this next 18 days or so is the reflective mind. Quite interesting. And like contemplation, maybe preparing oneself before mystery traditions or weighing it up. Do I want to do it or not? You know, but it's a reflectiveness. And then when we get to Leo the lion, it's all knowing, just beaming out there, doesn't reflect or contemplate, it just knows. So vine, reflective mind. Now then, for the last few minutes, like I say, on the Facebook group, I'll put a post about the history of winemaking in Ireland, so to dispel all of that stuff. But there are Celtic gods of the vine. That's a known thing anyway. So immediately in Britain, in the northern Britain, north of the Midlands, Yorkshire, there's evidence, inscriptions from Romano-British Celtic times of a god called Vinotonus, V-I-N-O-T-O-N-U-S. And it just means the wine god of wine, Vinotonus, you know, Romano-Celtic times. And in Gaul, there's a known god called Sucellus, and Sucellus is the god of the vine. So he's not Welsh, he's not Irish, but he is Gallic. He's still Celtic, you know, and he's the Celtic Gallic god of the wine. Now, even before the Roman times, the Gaels of Ireland used to trade with the Gauls of Gaul, and wine was the main thing they traded for. You know, the winemaking of France is very, 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 very old, of course, you know, and it, more than it being alcohol, which can change your state of mind, it's also a sweetener. You know, before there was sugar, the only sweetener you had was honey, and honey, it's hard to make it last all year round. You know, it runs out, especially if you're a big tribe. What the vine gave you that most people overlook because they think of the wine, it gave you raisins and sultanas and currants. You know, the dried fruit was a thing of trade as well, because you could sweeten your bread with these raisins and sultanas. It was a sugar alternative to honey, you know, and it's a something that you can store and again sweeten your food with. Now then, so the main god for the British Isles, Romano-Celtic god, is Silvanus, and his name just means of the woods. And he's very much a Romano-British Pan. You know, depictions of Pan show Pan dancing around with nymphs and dryads. And Silvanus is the same. You know, he's a protector of the forest. He lives in the forest, and he's accompanied by sexy females that are called Silvanae. You know, but they're just nymphs or dryads. It's just the followers of Silvanus, if you like, you know, but it's very much sexy, it's sap rising and buds opening and all of that kind of thing, but it's the fertility of the forest, and he protects that completely. Now, an interesting thing with Silvanus is he's often depicted with apples and grapes, and that's there in the Ogham Grove. The apple tree is next to the vine, the grape tree, you know, so he very much represents now, today, this transition between apple to grapes. That's Silvanus's main symbols, you know. So for the next 18 days, it's worth thinking about him. You know, he's like I said earlier, he's directly opposite Birch. So Birch begins the Ogham Grove with Ellen of the Ways. She's the goddess sovereignty of the land, and you know, her zodiac or ecliptic opposite is Silvanus here, god of wine and protector of the forests. That they're a balance, they're a polarity, you know, that they harmonize with each other. So I think that's it. So I'll stop recording and you can put your microphones back on and we'll chat about some of those ideas.